The screenshot loaded on my computer monitor, and my hands started trembling so violently I knocked over my morning coffee. The brown liquid spread across my desk like spilled blood, but I couldn't look away from the image on the screen. Someone wearing my face was making obscene gestures in a video that had been shared 17,000 times, accompanied by racist slurs I would never speak and conspiracy theories I would never believe. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I start my story, I would love to know what city you are joining me from. Feel free to share it in the comments. Now, let me immerse you in this story. I grabbed my phone with shaking fingers and scrolled through the dozens of messages that had flooded in overnight. Former colleagues from the hospital had sent screenshots. My daughter's friends had tagged her in the posts, asking if her mother had lost her mind. The principal of the school where I'd volunteered for 15 years had left a voicemail I couldn't bear to listen to. My carefully built reputation as a pediatric nurse and community advocate was disintegrating with every passing hour. The doorbell rang 3 times in rapid succession, sharp and urgent. I rushed down the stairs, my bare feet slapping against the hardwood. Through the frosted glass, I could see a figure with a camera. I froze on the bottom step, my breath catching in my throat. A reporter. They'd found my house. "Ms. Lawrence, can you comment on your recent social media posts?" I backed away from the door, pressing myself against the wall. My heart hammered against my ribcage so hard it hurt. The doorbell rang again, longer this time, more insistent. I crawled on my hands and knees past the windows, staying below the sightline, feeling like an intruder in my own home. In the kitchen, I pulled out my laptop with trembling hands and opened my banking apps. My stomach dropped. Someone had tried to access my accounts from 3 different locations in the past 12 hours. The security alerts blinked red across the screen. My phone buzzed. A text from my supervisor at County General. "We need to talk. Come to my office immediately." I threw on yesterday's clothes without showering, pulled a baseball cap low over my face, and slipped out through the back gate. The morning air bit at my cheeks as I jogged through the alley behind my house. Every car that passed made me flinch. Every person who glanced my way felt like an accusation. When I reached my Honda, parked 2 blocks away to avoid the reporter, my hands shook so badly, I dropped my keys twice before getting the door open. The hospital parking garage was nearly empty at 7 in the morning. I took the back elevator, the one housekeeping used, and kept my face turned toward the wall. My reflection in the steel doors showed a woman I barely recognized. Eyes sunken, skin gray, hair wild and uncombed. The supervisor's office door stood partially open. Through the gap, I could see her standing with her arms crossed, her jaw set in a hard line. 2 security guards flanked her desk. My legs felt like water as I pushed the door wider and stepped inside. "Sit down," she said, not meeting my eyes. I lowered myself into the chair, gripping the armrests. One of the guards moved to stand behind me. The supervisor slid a tablet across her desk, screen facing me. The video played automatically. That face, my face, saying things that made my stomach turn, sharing patient information I would never disclose, violating every ethical code I'd sworn to uphold. "That's not me," I whispered. "The IT department traced these posts back to your email account. Your verified social media profiles." The supervisor's finger stabbed at a stack of printouts beside the tablet. Papers spilled across the desk. Screenshots of posts I'd never written, photos I'd never taken, conversations I'd never had. My vision blurred at the edges as I leaned forward, scanning the evidence that someone had methodically destroyed my life. I reached for the nearest page, hand trembling. The words swam before my eyes. Racist comments about patients, complaints about administration, violations of privacy laws. Each sentence was a nail in my coffin. My fingerprints weren't on these keyboards. My voice hadn't spoken these words. But there was my face, my name, my credentials displayed like trophies beside each damning post. "Someone's framing me!" The words scraped out of my throat, raw and desperate. The supervisor pulled the papers away, her movement sharp and final. She straightened the stack with precise taps against the desk surface. Behind me, one of the guards shifted his weight. The floorboard creaked. The sound made my shoulders tense, anticipating what came next. "Your badge and hospital ID." She extended her palm across the desk. My fingers fumbled with the lanyard around my neck. 23 years I'd worn this badge. 23 years of double shifts and holiday rotations, of holding dying patients' hands and celebrating newborns' first breaths. The plastic felt heavier than it should as I unclipped it from the lanyard. The photo showed a woman with bright eyes and a confident smile, someone who belonged here, someone who'd earned her place through sweat and dedication. I placed it in her waiting hand. She pulled it back immediately, dropped it into her desk drawer, and slammed it shut. The metallic clang echoed in the small office. "Security will escort you out. You're not to access hospital grounds or contact any staff members while the investigation proceeds." The guard behind me touched my elbow. Not rough, but firm, insistent. I rose on unsteady legs, my knees threatening to buckle. The second guard moved to my other side, boxing me in. They walked me through the administrative wing, their shoes clicking in perfect rhythm against the linoleum. My sneakers squeaked with each step, a pathetic counterpoint to their authority. We passed the nurses' station where I'd worked my first rotation as a young graduate. Teresa sat behind the desk, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed charts. She glanced up as we approached. Her eyes widened when she saw me flanked by security. Her mouth formed a small O of surprise. Then her gaze darted away, back to her papers, her neck flushing red. The elevator ride down felt endless. I stared at the numbers descending, each floor a marker of my fall from grace. My reflection in the polished doors showed a criminal being perp-walked from the building. The guards stood rigid beside me, eyes forward, professional and detached. When the doors opened to the lobby, I caught sight of the reporter from yesterday lurking near the entrance. His head snapped up. Recognition flashed across his face. He grabbed his camera from the bench beside him and charged toward us, weaving between patients and visitors. The guards quickened their pace, steering me toward the side exit. My heart hammered against my ribs. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed like angry wasps. We burst through the emergency exit into harsh daylight. The reporter's shouts followed us through the closing door. The guards didn't release my arms until we'd crossed the parking lot to my car. One of them waited while I fumbled my keys from my pocket, watching to ensure I actually left. I drove without direction, turned corners without thinking, until I found myself in a strip mall parking lot 3 miles from home. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. In my rear-view mirror, other cars came and went, people living normal lives, running ordinary errands, their reputations intact. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers. The screen lit up with 37 new notifications. My stomach lurched as I scrolled through them. Comments on articles I'd never read. Reviews of restaurants I'd never visited. Political rants on message boards I'd never heard of. All attributed to me. All bearing my name and photograph. Someone had stolen my face. My identity. My voice. I clicked on the most recent post. A vicious diatribe about immigration on a local news site. The profile picture showed me at last year's hospital charity gala, smiling in my blue dress. My fingers shook as I read words I would never say, opinions I would never hold. The comments below burned with anger and disgust directed at me. At this twisted version of me that someone had constructed. The door of a nearby minivan slammed. A woman herded 2 children toward the grocery store, her voice carrying across the asphalt as she reminded them about staying close. Normal life continuing while mine disintegrated. I opened my email app. The inbox overflowed with messages from colleagues, neighbors, former patients. Subject lines screamed at me. Disappointed! How could you? This is who you really are. My throat constricted. I clicked on one from the hospital administrator's office, sent an hour before my suspension. The email contained screenshots. My face, my name, posts dating back 3 months on various platforms, racist commentary, conspiracy theories about vaccines, attacks on other medical professionals, a fabricated Twitter account with thousands of followers, all built on my stolen identity, all spouting poison. My hands moved on autopilot, opening my banking app. The account balance looked normal. I checked my credit cards. No unusual activity. At least the impersonator hadn't touched my finances yet. But they'd found something more valuable to steal. They'd taken who I was and turned it into someone monstrous. A text message arrived from a number I didn't recognize. I hesitated before opening it, my thumb hovering over the screen. The message contained no words, just a link to a Facebook page. My Facebook page. Except I'd deleted my account 2 years ago after getting tired of the drama. This page showed hundreds of posts, dozens of photos scraped from somewhere. My old account, probably, or from other people's pages where I'd been tagged. The impersonator had built an entire online life for me. Friends list filled with strangers, check-ins at bars and clubs I'd never visited, shares of extremist content that made my skin crawl. I took screenshots of everything, my fingers flying across the screen despite their shaking. Evidence. I needed evidence. Another text arrived from the same unknown number. Enjoying your new reputation? My breath caught. I stared at the words, pulse thundering in my ears. The impersonator was watching. They knew I'd found their handiwork. I typed back with fumbling fingers. Who are you? 3 dots appeared, indicating typing, then disappeared, then appeared again. The wait stretched like pulled taffy. Finally, the response came. Someone you should have been nicer to. I ran through mental files of every interaction, every patient, every disagreement. The hospital employed hundreds. I treated dozens of patients weekly. Which one had I offended badly enough to warrant this systematic destruction? My phone rang, the sudden sound making me jump so hard I nearly dropped it. Unknown caller. I let it ring once, twice, then answered without speaking. Heavy breathing filled my ear. Then a digitally distorted voice, robotic and cold. You took something from me. Now I'm taking everything from you. The line went dead. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat as if it had burned me. My chest heaved with rapid breaths that fogged the windshield. Around me, the parking lot continued its mundane rhythm. A teenager pushed a line of shopping carts. A man loaded bags into his trunk. None of them knew that my entire existence was being dismantled by someone I couldn't identify, couldn't confront, couldn't stop. I started the engine. My hands steadied slightly as I gripped the wheel, channeling fear into determination. The police station sat 15 minutes away on the other side of town. I pulled out of the parking space, narrowly missing a turning sedan. The driver honked, long and angry. I barely registered it. The police station's fluorescent lights bleached everything to the color of old bones. I stood at the counter, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles had gone pale. The officer behind the plexiglass barrier looked younger than my daughter, his uniform still crisp with newness. "So someone's posting things online pretending to be you." He clicked his pen repeatedly, the sound drilling into my skull. "They've destroyed my career, my reputation. I got fired today." He slid a form across the counter. The paper whispered against the worn surface. I stared at the endless lines of questions, each one demanding details I couldn't provide. IP addresses, technical specifications, evidence that would hold up in court. "Fill this out. We'll file a report. But honestly, ma'am, these cases are difficult. The person could be anywhere." I left the station 20 minutes later with nothing but a case number that felt as useful as thoughts and prayers. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of bruising. My car sat alone in the corner of the lot, and something about its isolation sent ice down my spine. A piece of paper fluttered under the windshield wiper. My feet carried me forward, even as my mind screamed to run. The note was printed on plain white paper, the kind sold in 1,000-sheet reams at any office supply store. 5 words in Times New Roman, size 12. "You look tired, Dr. Lawrence." I spun around, scanning the parking lot. Empty cars reflected the streetlights. Shadows pooled between vehicles. The strip mall across the street had closed for the evening, its windows dark and dead. Someone had been here. Someone had touched my car while I was inside seeking help. The note crumpled in my fist. I unlocked the door and threw myself into the driver's seat, immediately hitting the lock button. My breath came in short gasps that steamed the windows from the inside, creating a fog that isolated me further. My phone buzzed. Another email. Another fake account. This one claiming to be me responding to a concerned colleague. The message dripped with paranoia and delusion, painting me as someone spiraling into mental illness. I scrolled through the response thread, watching my professional network distance themselves one reply at a time. Then I saw it. The timestamp on the fake email. Sent 4 minutes ago. Sent while I was reading the note on my windshield. Whoever was doing this wasn't working alone. I pulled out of the parking lot too fast, tires squealing on the cold asphalt. The drive home took me through my neighborhood, past houses where families sat down to dinner behind glowing windows. Normal lives, intact lives, everything I'd built over 3 decades was being torn apart by invisible hands. My house materialized from the darkness, and wrongness hit me before I even turned into the driveway. The porch light was off. I always left it on, an automatic habit from years of late shifts. The front door stood open 6 inches, darkness yawning behind it. I killed the engine but didn't get out. My hand found my phone, thumb hovering over 911. The street was quiet. Mrs. Patterson's house next door showed lights, her television flickering blue through the curtains. A dog barked 3 houses down. The front door swung wider. No wind had pushed it. Someone stood in the doorway, backlit by the faint glow of my hallway nightlight. Average height, shoulders squared, face obscured by shadow. I punched 911 into my phone, finger on the call button. The figure raised one hand in a wave, slow and deliberate, then stepped back into my house, swallowed by darkness. I threw open the car door, and my feet hit the pavement. The cold air burned my lungs as I ran toward my house, phone clutched in one hand. Every instinct screamed at me to wait for police, but rage overrode fear. This was my home, my sanctuary, the last piece of my life this person hadn't already destroyed. The porch steps creaked under my weight. I shouldered through the front door, fingers fumbling along the wall for the light switch. The overhead fixture blazed to life, flooding the entryway with harsh yellow light. Nothing. empty hallway stretching back toward the kitchen. My coat rack stood undisturbed. The side table where I kept my keys sat exactly as I'd left it this morning. I moved deeper into the house, pulse hammering in my ears. The living room appeared untouched, throw pillows arranged just so on the couch. My reading glasses rested on the coffee table beside yesterday's newspaper. But the air felt different. Wrong. Someone else's presence lingered like smoke. The kitchen. I rounded the corner and stopped dead. My laptop sat open on the kitchen table. I'd left it upstairs in my office, powered down and closed. Now the screen glowed blue, logged into my email account. A new message sat in the composition window, half written, addressed to my daughter in Chicago. Bethany, I need help. I'm not well. The thoughts won't stop. My hands shook as I reached for the laptop. The words continued down the screen, describing delusions, paranoia, asking her to come home and help me find psychiatric care, begging her not to tell anyone at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. Every sentence perfectly matched my writing style, my speech patterns. A floorboard groaned upstairs. I spun toward the sound, every muscle tensed. The laptop screen reflected in the kitchen window, and beyond it, darkness pressed against the glass. I grabbed a knife from the block on the counter, the weight of it foreign in my grip. 27 years as a therapist, talking people through crisis. Now, I stood in my own kitchen armed like a home invader. The stairs creaked as I climbed them, one hand on the railing, the other clutching the knife. My office door stood ajar. Light from the street lamp outside cast geometric shadows across the hallway carpet. I nudged the door wider with my foot. The room had been ransacked. File cabinets hung open, papers scattered across the floor like autumn leaves. My desk drawers gaped empty. Photographs from my credenza lay torn and scattered, images of my career destroyed. My doctoral diploma, carefully framed and hung 20 years ago, now lay shattered on the floor, glass fragments glittering. But my eyes locked on the wall above my desk. Someone had tacked up printouts, dozens of them. Screenshots of social media posts, all under my name. Messages to former patients breaking confidentiality, sharing intimate details of their sessions. Posts on professional forums spreading conspiracy theories about psychiatric medication. A manifesto about government mind control, rambling and incoherent, posted to my LinkedIn profile. None of it was real. All of it was me. My legs gave out. I sank onto the edge of my desk chair, knife clattering to the floor. This wasn't random harassment anymore. Someone had studied me, learned my voice, infiltrated every corner of my digital life. They'd been inside my house, touched my things, breathed my air. A car door slammed outside. I lurched to the window, pushing aside the curtain. A police cruiser sat at my curb, lights dark. Mrs. Patterson stood on her porch in a bathrobe, gesturing toward my house. She must have called them when she saw my door open. 2 officers approached my walkway, hands resting on their belts. The younger one, barely 30, pointed his flashlight at my front door. His partner, a woman with gray streaking her pulled-back hair, spoke into her radio. I started for the stairs, then froze. On the floor beside my desk, half hidden under scattered papers, lay a wallet. Brown leather, worn at the edges. Not mine. I picked it up with shaking hands and flipped it open. A driver's license stared back at me. The face in the photo made my blood turn to ice. Trevor Holloway. The name hit me like a physical blow. 10 years ago. Court-ordered therapy after his 3rd DUI. He'd sat in my office for 6 months, hostile and resistant, blaming everyone but himself. I'd recommended against early termination of his probation. The judge had listened. The doorbell rang downstairs, followed by heavy knocking. "Police! We got a call about a possible break-in." I clutched the wallet, mind racing. Trevor had been in my house. Trevor had been destroying my life. But why now, after a decade? And how had he gotten access to everything, every password, every account? The knocking intensified. The female officer's voice carried through the door, firm and authoritative. "Ma'am, we need you to come to the door. Mrs. Patterson reported suspicious activity." I moved down the stairs like a sleepwalker, wallet still gripped in one hand. Through the door's frosted glass window, I could see their silhouettes. My hand reached for the deadbolt, then stopped. What would I tell them? That a former patient was stalking me, impersonating me online, systematically ruining my reputation? They'd want evidence. They'd want proof. And Trevor had left nothing but that wallet, which could have been planted, could be another layer of the trap. The older officer pressed her face closer to the glass. "We're coming in if you don't respond. Are you in distress?" I opened the door. Both officers stepped back, hands moving toward their weapons. The younger one's flashlight beam hit my face, blinding me. "I'm Dr. Iris Lawrence. I live here. Someone broke in while I was out." The younger officer swept past me without asking, flashlight beam cutting through my darkened living room. His boots tracked mud across the hardwood floor I'd refinished 3 years ago. The older officer stayed on the threshold, her hand still resting on her belt, eyes scanning me from head to toe. "You're bleeding, ma'am." I touched my forehead where I'd hit the doorframe earlier. My fingers came away sticky and dark. The adrenaline had masked the pain until now, but her words brought a sharp throb that pulsed behind my eyes. "It's nothing. Just knocked into something when I realized someone had been here." The older officer stepped inside, pulling the door closed behind her with a firm click that made my chest tighten. She moved through my entryway with the confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Her gaze cataloging details I couldn't see anymore. The family photos on the wall. The antique mirror from my grandmother. The small table where I always dropped my keys. "Dispatch said your neighbor reported seeing someone leaving through your back gate 20 minutes ago. Male, average height, dark clothing." "Trevor." My hand squeezed the wallet tighter, the leather creaking. The younger officer emerged from my kitchen, shaking his head. "Back door's locked from inside. No signs of forced entry. Want me to check upstairs?" I moved to block the staircase, my body acting on instinct before my mind could catch up. The bedroom. The photos spread across my comforter. The laptop still open to those fabricated social media posts where someone wearing my face spewed hatred and bile into the digital void. "No, I already checked. Nothing's missing up there." The older officer's eyebrows rose slightly. Her nameplate read Chen in bold letters. She'd been watching me this whole time, not the house, and I could feel her assessment sharpening. "But something's missing down here?" "I don't know yet. I haven't had time to—" "What's in your hand?" The question landed like a punch. I looked down at Trevor's wallet, at the worn leather that had molded to his pocket over years of carrying. My thumb rubbed across the surface, feeling every scratch and crease. If I showed them, they'd run his ID. They'd find his record, his connection to me, the probation violation I'd documented. They'd also find the restraining order I'd never filed, the threats I'd never reported, the pattern of escalation I'd ignored because I thought I could handle it professionally. "Just my wallet." I grabbed it when I heard something upstairs. The lie tasted metallic, mixing with the blood I'd accidentally bitten from my inner cheek. Officer Chen extended her hand, palm up, waiting. Her partner had disappeared down the hallway toward my study, and I could hear him opening closets, checking windows. "May I see it?" My fingers loosened against my will, some deeply ingrained response to authority overriding my panicked reasoning. But before the wallet could leave my hand, a crash erupted from my study. Glass shattering. The younger officer's startled curse. Officer Chen's radio crackled as she spun toward the sound, hand now firmly on her weapon. I dropped the wallet into my cardigan pocket and followed her down the hall, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought they might crack. The study window gaped open, cold October air rushing through like an accusation. My computer monitor lay face down on the floor, screen shattered into a spider web of cracks. The younger officer leaned out the window, flashlight sweeping across my backyard. "Someone just went over the fence, northeast corner." He climbed through the window frame with surprising agility, his bulky uniform catching briefly on the sill before he dropped into my garden below. Officer Chen grabbed her radio, calling for backup, reciting codes and coordinates that barely registered through the roaring in my ears. Trevor had been here the whole time, hiding in my study while I'd given my statement, while I'd led them inside, while I'd lied about the wallet. He'd watched me fumble and panic and incriminate myself with every nervous gesture. Officer Chen grabbed my shoulder, steering me away from the window. "Ma'am, I need you to sit down, right now. Living room." But I was staring at my desk, at the papers scattered across its surface. My patient files, confidential records I kept in a locked cabinet that now stood open, its door hanging at an odd angle. Names and case numbers and private notes exposed under the overhead light. One file sat centered on my keyboard, opened to a specific page. Trevor Matheson's intake form from 10 years ago, with my signature at the bottom. Someone had drawn a red circle around my name, the marker so fresh it hadn't quite dried. When I touched it, crimson ink transferred to my fingertip like blood. Beneath the file, a printed email thread I'd never seen before. Messages sent from my work account to Trevor's probation officer, recommending immediate termination of supervision, praising his progress, suggesting he'd been rehabilitated. Each one dated within the last 3 months. Each one signed with my name and professional credentials. Each one a complete fabrication that would destroy what remained of my career. Officer Chen's hand tightened on my shoulder, trying to guide me out, but my legs had forgotten how to move. The room tilted sideways, or maybe I did. My vision narrowed to that red circle, that signature, that evidence of a conspiracy so thorough it had anticipated every move I might make to defend myself. My knees buckled. The floor rushed up to meet me, but Officer Chen caught me under the arms before I collapsed completely. He lowered me into the chair beside my desk, his grip firm but not gentle. The vinyl squeaked under my weight, and I felt the edge of the seat cutting into the backs of my thighs through my thin pajama pants. "Breathe," he said, not kindly, but breathing required coordination my body no longer possessed. My chest hitched in shallow gasps that brought no oxygen. Black spots danced across my vision. I gripped the armrests, feeling the plastic crack under my fingers. Chen barked something into his radio. Static crackled in response, followed by a voice I couldn't decipher through the roaring in my ears. He moved away, his boots heavy on the hardwood, but I couldn't track where he went. All I could see was that file, those emails, that perfect forgery of my professional life twisted into something monstrous. My phone buzzed on the desk. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. I reached for it with trembling fingers, nearly knocking it to the floor. The screen lit up with notifications, text messages from numbers I didn't recognize, each preview showing just enough to make my stomach lurch. Photos, Screenshots. Comments from social media platforms I'd abandoned weeks ago when this nightmare began. The first image showed me, or someone wearing my face, in a bar I'd never visited. The woman in the photo had her arms draped around two men half her age, her blouse open 3 buttons too far, her head thrown back in drunken laughter. The timestamp read 3 nights ago. Thursday evening, when I'd been in my apartment eating reheated soup and reviewing case notes until midnight. I swiped to the next message. Another photo, this one grainier, taken from a distance. The same woman stumbling out of a hotel, her makeup smeared, her clothes disheveled. A man's hand visible on her lower back, guiding her toward a waiting car. My thumb moved without conscious direction, opening message after message. Each one revealed a new piece of a life I'd never lived, but could never escape. Social media posts written in my voice, but not my words. Praising convicted predators, minimizing their crimes, attacking their victims with clinical language that sounded disturbingly authentic. Comments on news articles about violent offenders, defending their actions with psychological terminology only someone with my training would know. The phone slipped from my grip and clattered onto the desk. My hands were shaking so violently I couldn't hold anything. Sweat soaked through my shirt, cold and clammy against my skin. I tasted copper and realized I'd bitten through my lower lip. Officer Chen returned, carrying something in an evidence bag. He held it up to the light, and I saw my work badge, the one I'd reported lost 3 weeks ago, dangling from its lanyard. Except it wasn't lost. Someone had been using it. "Found this in your bedroom drawer," he said. "Along with these." He dropped a second evidence bag on the desk. Prescription bottles rolled against the plastic, at least a dozen of them, all labeled with my name and the clinic's pharmacy. Oxycodone, Xanax, Adderall. Medications I'd never been prescribed, in quantities that suggested intent to distribute. My mouth opened, but no sound emerged. I wanted to scream that they'd been planted, that I'd never seen them before, that someone had been in my home staging this elaborate frame. But the words died in my throat because I knew how it sounded. Every addict, every criminal, every guilty person claimed they'd been set up. Chen was watching me with the expression of someone who'd seen this performance 1,000 times before. His hand rested on his belt, inches from his handcuffs. A crash came from my bedroom. Both of us turned toward the sound. Another officer emerged, dragging a suitcase I recognized from my hall closet. He unzipped it on my coffee table, revealing stacks of cash bundled with rubber bands, alongside a burner phone still in its packaging. "Found it under the bed," the officer said. "Must be 10 grand here at least." My vision tunneled. The room spun. I gripped the desk's edge to keep from sliding off the chair, my fingernails scraping against the wood hard enough to splinter. Every muscle in my body had gone rigid, locked in a paralysis that felt like drowning on dry land. Chen moved closer, his shadow falling across my lap. He pulled the handcuffs from his belt with a soft metallic click that seemed to echo through the apartment. "Iris Lawrence," he began, his voice flat and procedural. The sound of my name, my real name, spoken in that tone, sent a jolt through my system like touching a live wire. My heart hammered against my ribs. Blood pounded in my ears. Everything I'd built over 30 years of practice, every patient I'd helped, every life I'd tried to rebuild, was crumbling into ash around me while I sat frozen and helpless. Tory Block 810. The handcuffs closed around my left wrist with a cold bite of metal against skin. My body moved on pure instinct. I yanked backward, the chair toppling as I stumbled to my feet. Chen's grip tightened, his fingers digging into my forearm hard enough to leave marks. "Don't make this worse," he said. The burner phone on my coffee table caught the light. Still sealed in plastic, never opened. My mind raced through the impossibility of it all. Someone had been in my apartment, planting evidence while wearing my face online, destroying everything I'd spent decades building. I twisted away from Chen, my free hand shooting toward the suitcase. If I could just grab the phone, check for fingerprints, prove it wasn't mine. My fingers grazed the plastic packaging before Chen's partner, a stocky officer with a shaved head, blocked my path. His shoulder connected with my chest, forcing me backward against the wall. The impact knocked the air from my lungs. "Stop resisting!" Chen barked. My pulse thundered. The apartment's white walls seemed to close in, suffocating. I could smell my own fear sweat mixing with the lingering scent of this morning's coffee. The second cuff dangled from my wrist, swinging as I struggled. Chen reached for my other arm. I pivoted left, my hip knocking into the desk hard enough to send papers cascading to the floor. Patient files, appointment schedules, the normal debris of my normal life that no longer existed. The bald officer grabbed my shoulders from behind. His hands were iron vices. I thrashed against him, my sneakers skidding on scattered papers. Chen moved in with the open cuff, his jaw set in grim determination. Through the window behind Chen's head, I saw movement on the fire escape. A figure in dark clothing, watching. My breath caught. The person wore a surgical mask and a baseball cap pulled low, but something about their posture, the way they stood with arms crossed, felt familiar in a way that made my stomach drop. "There!" I gasped, jerking my chin toward the window. "Someone's outside." Chen didn't turn. Neither did his partner. They thought it was a distraction, another desperate ploy. The bald officer wrenched my arm back. Pain shot through my shoulder socket. I kicked backward, my heel connecting with his shin. He grunted, but didn't release me. The figure on the fire escape moved closer to the glass. They pressed something against the window, a phone, camera facing inward. Recording. My mind spun with horrible clarity. They were documenting my arrest, capturing footage of my humiliation, evidence for whatever next move they'd planned in this calculated destruction of my life. I threw my weight sideways. The bald officer stumbled. For one heartbeat, I was free, lunging toward the window. My fingers touched the cold glass just as Chen caught my waist, pulling me back with force that lifted my feet off the ground. I slammed against his chest, the second cuff clicking into place around my wrist with terrible finality. "Officer Chen," I said, my voice raw. "Please look, they're watching, the person who did this." Chen finally glanced toward the window. The fire escape was empty, just metal grating and the brick wall of the building next door. No figure, no phone, nothing but my reflection in the glass. A wild-eyed woman in handcuffs, flanked by police officers, looking exactly like the criminal the evidence suggested I was. My knees buckled. Chen held me upright, his grip almost gentle now that the cuffs had done their work. The bald officer collected the suitcase, zipping it closed over the damning cash and pristine burner phone. A third officer I hadn't noticed before emerged from my bedroom carrying a laptop bag and a folder of documents. "Victim's statement from Dr. Marcus Webb is solid," the third officer said to Chen. "Multiple witnesses confirm the harassment campaign. Her digital footprint is everywhere." The name hit me like a physical blow. Marcus Webb, I'd met him once, maybe twice, at a psychiatric conference 3 years ago. We'd had a brief, cordial conversation about trauma-informed care. Nothing more. Now he was calling himself my victim. My throat tightened. I tried to speak, to explain, but no sound came. Chen guided me toward the door with steady pressure on my elbow. My legs moved mechanically, disconnected from conscious thought. We passed my bookshelf crammed with medical texts, my small kitchen with its clean dishes drying in the rack, my coat closet where I'd hung my favorite jacket just this morning when the world still made sense. In the hallway, my neighbor Mrs. Kowalski stood in her doorway, one gnarled hand pressed to her mouth. Her eyes were wide with shock. She'd known me for 12 years. We'd shared holiday cookies. I'd helped her grandson apply to medical school. Now she was watching me being led away in handcuffs like a stranger she'd never really known at all. The elevator ride down was silent except for the mechanical hum of descent. 23 floors. Each one felt like a countdown to the end of everything. Chen stood behind me, his breathing steady and professional. The bald officer shifted his weight, making the floor creak. The mirrored walls reflected my image from multiple angles, hair disheveled, shirt untucked, eyes hollow with shock. The lobby doors opened to chaos. The courtroom 3 months later smelled of old wood and recycled air. I sat at the defense table, my hands folded over a manila folder containing everything that would determine my future. The burgundy suit I'd chosen hung looser than when I'd bought it. Stress had carved 15 pounds from my frame. Behind me, the gallery filled with murmuring voices, shuffling feet, the rustle of coats being removed and draped over seats. Marcus Webb sat across the aisle with his attorney, a sharp-faced woman in pinstripes who kept whispering strategies into his ear. He'd gained weight since the arrest, his face fuller, skin pale from months of indoor confinement. Our eyes met once. He looked away first, his jaw clenching. My attorney, Joanna Reeves, arranged documents with methodical precision. She was 42, relentless, the kind of lawyer who dissected lies with surgical accuracy. We'd spent weeks preparing, reconstructing the timeline of Marcus's campaign against me. The fake social media accounts, the manipulated emails, the deepfake videos he'd created using AI software, and stolen footage from my conference presentations. The bailiff announced Judge Patricia Huang's entrance. Everyone stood. The judge settled into her chair with the weight of authority, her silver hair caught in a tight bun, reading glasses perched on her nose. She reviewed papers on her bench, the silence stretching until my pulse hammered in my ears. "This case has been unusual," Judge Huang began, looking up. "Dr. Lawrence, you've faced significant damage to your professional reputation. Mr. Webb, you've been charged with criminal impersonation, harassment, and identity theft." Marcus shifted in his seat. His attorney placed a restraining hand on his arm. Joanna stood, buttoning her jacket in one smooth motion. "Your Honor, the evidence demonstrates a calculated 18-month campaign to destroy Dr. Lawrence's career. My client lost her medical license, her practice, her savings defending herself against false accusations." She clicked a remote. The screen behind her lit up with data trails, IP addresses, metadata from doctored images, forum posts time-stamped to show the progression of lies. Each slide represented hours of digital forensics work by the cybersecurity expert I'd hired with money borrowed from my sister. Mr. Webb created 47 separate online personas, Joanna continued, advancing through screenshots. He impersonated Dr. Lawrence on medical forums, posted fabricated testimonials from fake patients, and distributed altered photographs designed to appear as evidence of misconduct. I watched Marcus's face as each piece of evidence appeared. A muscle twitched beneath his left eye. His fingers drummed against the table until his attorney stilled them with a sharp glance. The prosecution called their witness, Detective Raymond Chen. He walked to the stand with the same measured stride I remembered from that terrible morning in my apartment. Under questioning, he detailed the investigation that had eventually cleared me and identified Marcus as the perpetrator. The suspect's own digital footprint became his undoing, Chen testified. He'd used a VPN, but inconsistently. We traced communications back to his home network, recovered deleted files from his computer, showing the fabricated content before he distributed it. Marcus's attorney cross-examined, trying to introduce doubt, suggesting others might have accessed his computer. But Chen's testimony held firm, backed by forensic reports thick enough to serve as doorstops. During the lunch recess, I stepped outside the courthouse. Spring sunlight hit my face with startling warmth. Trees along the street had begun leafing out, their branches decorated with pale green newness. I bought coffee from a vendor, letting the heat seep through the paper cup into my palms. A text from my sister appeared on my phone. "Thinking of you. Call tonight." Back inside, the afternoon session brought Marcus himself to the stand. His attorney had advised against it. Joanna had told me this with barely concealed satisfaction, but he'd insisted. Pride or desperation, hard to tell which. Under direct examination, he claimed I'd wronged him professionally, that his actions were justified response to some imagined slight from years ago. His voice cracked as he spoke, hands gesturing wildly, constructing a narrative where he was the victim defending himself against my supposed manipulation. Then Joanna stood for cross-examination. "Mr. Webb, you testified that Dr. Lawrence damaged your career? What evidence do you have of this?" He stammered, mentioned the conference conversation, twisted it into something unrecognizable. "Did Dr. Lawrence ever communicate with you after that conference?" "No, but did she ever contact your employer, your colleagues, anyone in your professional circle?" "Not directly, but—" "Answer yes or no, Mr. Webb." His shoulders sagged. "No." Joanna walked him through each fabricated account, each doctored image, each false testimonial. With every question, she dismantled his justifications, exposing the elaborate architecture of his obsession. By the time she finished, he sat slumped in the witness chair, his face blotchy with emotion, his carefully constructed victim narrative in ruins around him. The judge called for closing arguments. I listened to Joanna's voice outline the scope of damage: professional, financial, emotional. I thought about the patients I'd lost, the colleagues who'd stopped returning calls, the nights I'd lain awake wondering if my career would ever recover. Judge Huang delivered her verdict without lengthy deliberation. Guilty on all counts. Marcus's face crumbled. His mother, sitting in the front row, let out a choked sob. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. I walked out of the courthouse into evening light, the sky painted orange and purple above the city buildings. Joanna squeezed my shoulder once before heading to her car. I stood on the courthouse steps, breathing deeply. Traffic sounds washed over me. Horns, engine rumble, the hydraulic sigh of a bus pulling away from the curb. My phone buzzed with messages from people who'd followed the trial, offering congratulations, support, cautious hope for my reinstatement. But I wasn't thinking about my license or my practice. I was thinking about the long road ahead, the work of rebuilding not just a career, but the fundamental trust that Marcus's lies had shattered. The verdict didn't erase what had happened. It simply acknowledged the truth, finally, publicly, officially. I descended the steps slowly, each one solid beneath my feet. Story block, 10 to 10. 6 months later, I stood in the renovated clinic space on Laurel Avenue, painting the waiting room walls a warm, sage green. The roller moved in steady vertical strokes, covering the primer with color that reminded me of healing, of growth. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows I'd specifically chosen for this location, casting rectangular patterns across the hardwood floor. The insurance settlement had arrived 3 months after the sentencing. Marcus was serving 18 months, his digital forensics business dissolved, his reputation as demolished as he'd tried to make mine. I'd taken the money and done something I hadn't allowed myself to dream about during the darkest months. Opened a community mental health center that offered sliding scale fees. My assistant Raphael knocked on the doorframe, holding 2 steaming cups. He set one on the paint-splattered tarp and surveyed my work with an approving nod. "Looking good, Dr. Lawrence. The furniture arrives tomorrow morning at 8. I climbed down from the stepladder, my knees protesting slightly. The physical labor felt good, grounding. I'd spent too many months trapped in legal proceedings, watching my life dissected in courtrooms and depositions. This work, concrete, visible, tangible, satisfied something deep within me that had gone hungry. The medical board had reinstated my license 4 months ago, their letter formal, but the tone subtly apologetic. Several former patients had reached out, asking if I was accepting new clients. I'd reconnected with 3 of them, careful conversations that rebuilt bridges Marcus's impersonation had burned. But I wasn't going back to my old practice. That version of my professional life belonged to someone who hadn't yet learned that success could be weaponized, that jealousy could take digital form and metastasize through networks at the speed of bandwidth. I walked to the window, coffee warming my palms. The neighborhood bustled with afternoon activity. A woman pushing a stroller. Teenagers clustered outside the corner store. An elderly man walking a small terrier. This community needed accessible mental health care. The statistics were staggering. The gaps in services almost criminal. My phone buzzed. A text from my daughter Sophie, sent from her graduate program across the country. "Mom, just saw the photo of the clinic. So proud of you. Call me tonight?" I smiled, my chest expanding with something that felt remarkably like joy. Sophie had witnessed the worst of the nightmare. My breakdown after the initial accusations, the months of uncertainty, the fear that had lived in my body like a second heartbeat. She'd flown home twice during the trial, sitting in the courtroom gallery, her presence an anchor when everything else felt liquid and unstable. Raphael returned with paint samples for the therapy offices. We spread them across the reception desk I'd purchased from an estate sale. Solid oak, scarred but sturdy, refinished to a warm, honey tone. "I like the sea foam for room 3, he said, tapping the middle swatch. "Calming, but not clinical." Agreed. We worked in comfortable silence, marking walls with painter's tape, preparing for tomorrow's color application. Raphael had responded to my job posting 2 months ago, a recent social work graduate with genuine enthusiasm and none of the jaded cynicism that sometimes infected mental health professionals. Hiring him had been instinctual, the kind of decision I'd learned to trust again. The doorbell chimed. Joanna entered carrying a bakery box, her blazer replaced by weekend casual clothes. She'd become more than my attorney, a friend forged in the fire of litigation, someone who'd seen me at my most vulnerable and never flinched. Brought celebration donuts. "This place is gorgeous, Iris." She walked through the space, examining the built-in bookshelves I'd had installed, the soft lighting fixtures, the small kitchen area where clients could make tea while waiting. Her approval radiated from her body language, the relaxed shoulders, the genuine smile. "You've created something special here." "It's not about me anymore," I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. Marcus wanted to destroy my reputation, my career, my sense of self. He succeeded partially. The old version of Dr. Iris Lawrence, focused on prestige and professional recognition. She did die. But something else emerged. I gestured at the clinic, At the community resource board I'd hung near the entrance, already filled with information about food banks, legal aid, housing assistance. My practice would exist within a larger ecosystem of care, acknowledging that mental health didn't exist in isolation from material circumstances. Joanna bit into a chocolate-glazed donut, nodding slowly. She understood transformation born from trauma, having built her own practice after escaping a toxic law firm partnership. The grand opening is next Thursday? Soft opening. I've scheduled 5 clients so far, all referrals from the community center down the street. I'm starting small, building slowly, making sure the foundation is solid this time. After Joanna left, I stayed in the clinic as evening descended. I turned on the lamps, testing the ambiance, imagining the space filled with people seeking help, finding support, experiencing the relief of being heard without judgment. My laptop sat on the desk, its screensaver rotating through photos. Sophie at graduation, my parents smiling from their retirement community in Arizona. A sunset I'd photographed from the courthouse steps the day of Marcus's sentencing. That last image reminded me how far I'd traveled. The woman standing on those steps had been vindicated, but hollow. Legally victorious, but emotionally depleted. The months since had required different work. Therapy for myself. Long walks that cleared my head. Reconnecting with my body through yoga classes. Allowing friends back into my guarded heart. I opened my laptop and navigated to my professional website, the one I'd painstakingly rebuilt with help from a reputation management firm. The fake profiles were gone, scrubbed from existence through court order and platform cooperation. My real online presence now reflected my actual values, my authentic voice, my current mission. But I'd also maintained a private blog, documenting my journey through the impersonation nightmare and its aftermath. Not for publication yet, maybe never, but as testimony to my own survival, evidence that destruction wasn't permanent, that identity could be reclaimed and reimagined. I typed a new entry, my fingers finding their rhythm on the keyboard. 6 months post-verdict. The clinic opens next week. I've learned that reputation is both more fragile and more resilient than I imagined. What others think of me matters less now. What I know about myself, that's the foundation that can't be faked or destroyed by someone else's malice. Marcus tried to erase me digitally. Instead, he forced me to become more solidly, undeniably real. I saved the draft and closed the laptop. Tomorrow would bring more painting, furniture assembly, final preparations. But tonight, I simply stood in my new space, breathing in the smell of fresh paint and possibility, grateful for the hard-won peace that had emerged from chaos. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.